Following is an AZPM original production.
Arizona Science is supported by Research Corporation for Science Advancement.
For AZPM, I'm Leslie Tolbert, Regents Professor Emerita in Neuroscience at the University of Arizona, and this is Arizona Science. Today we'll be talking with Barney McCabe, professor in UA's School of Information and executive director of the university's Institute for Computation and Data-Enabled Insight. Barney, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us about how you got into this idea that big data can reveal so much more than I think any of us expected.
So I actually started more in the high-performance computing and in sort of the computational science background and creating the machines that could provide very advanced simulation and very refined information about scientific principles. And so doing computational experimentation. For the last 15 years or so, I've been at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And that's when this transition from sort of computational modeling, simulation-driven capabilities changed into the data-driven that we're seeing now.
At an extreme scale.
At an extreme scale, that's right, in terms of how much data we can find and is applicable to addressing problems that we face on a daily basis.
So give us an example of something that could only be understood using the methods you're using right now.
Natural language processing, right? Understanding natural languages. If you look at the history of this, it goes back into the 1960s. And in the 1960s, they were coming up with formal models of grammar and formal structures. In fact, I studied a lot of that in graduate school. Noam Chomsky, who's in the area, was one of the founders in this notion of deep structure. And the idea at the time was look for structure, understand how we as humans use language to communicate. And so the idea being there's a surface structure that is what you say, there's what you actually mean, and you can do transformations. And so again, working in language design and compiler construction, we did a lot of that kind of work of getting formal structures to define languages and understand what that was. That only takes you so far. And it's very hard to build those rules. And so you will see that programming languages are fundamentally different than natural languages because they're in this formal structure that we do. The grammatical structures that are built are very rigid and very difficult to master as a result.
So you're getting closer and closer to having the machine able to respond to the way we're talking right now.
Yes. And so it's a behavioral response, right? And so this is the original Turing test, right? Was it possible to create a machine that you couldn't tell if it was behind a curtain, you couldn't tell. It's the imitation game was where it comes from. But the idea was you couldn't tell if you were talking to a human being or talking to an automaton. And I'd say now we've passed the Turing test.
And how do you deal with the obvious ethical issues that brings up? If you knew what I was going to say next, you might twist it and take me in a different direction.
So yeah, the ethical issues are deep and many-fold, right? There's certainly that issue of, is it transforming what you're saying, right? Is it taking in your voice in the style that you would write or the style you would communicate? Those are all sort of the deep fake issues that are coming up, and they're deeply a part of this whole conversation going forward.
And how do you address them?
You can't through technology. These are, and this is, I think, the one of the breakthroughs that's come in, and this goes back a while, but the constructs we're working with, truth, and what's fairness, those are social constructs. They're not formal mathematical concepts. And so we don't have the tools within the foundational mathematics and foundation of information theory to understand those. But we do have, if we look to the social context and we bring the social sciences in, we bring the humanities in, that's where we're going to have the breakthroughs in understanding how to deal with the social constructs.
Well, thank you very much, Barney. This has been absolutely fascinating.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Barney is an expert in big data and complex computer interactions and how we are going to move into the future in ethical ways. Thank you so much for joining us. You can listen to this and all Arizona Science conversations at azpm.org.
Thank you to Research Corporation for Science Advancement for their support of Arizona Science. AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.